Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My YouTube channel is Discerning What is True. What I'm going to be doing is to read a particular book that's over, basically over 300 some pages long. This book is by Phil Langdon. He was born in London. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in the field of mathematics and physics, and he's been pursuing what he calls the great work. So we're going to be reading from Ascension book here, chapter 1, which is called The Great Work by Philip Langdon. And let's get into the particular book here. Phil Langdon has been at this for quite a while. His ascension moment took place at Angkor Wat in Cambodia in 2014. He shared his experiences with a couple people, actually more than a couple people. You can look him up on YouTube channels. Basically, is what I understand simply is this particular temple is unlike any other temple as far as I know of. Doesn't mean there are other places that there aren't out there, but this place is considered a very peaceful, quiet atmosphere. Obviously, the temple was built for this reason. So it's trying to think of a better word than quietness. It would be what I call a place that you could contemplate. Many people come there. It's considered one of the 8 wonders of the world. And it's interesting also if you look into ley lines, and this particular place does apparently have ley lines. This particular town in northwestern part of Cambodia has at least probably, I'm gathering what I've read so far, it's been approximately 8 temples. Most of them were to do with Hinduism or Buddhism. And they apparently were built, this particular temple was built for people who were seeking peace in their lives. So this particular book, again, is going to be reading in chapter 1. And we're going to start out with a particular Bible verse that he quotes here. A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil, meaning it sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorned, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, that is 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. This is Matthew 13:3 from the NIV particular translation. This is the introduction about him. In my youth, growing up in the suburbs of London, I felt starved for what we call useful information. By the time I reached 20, I realized that nobody seemed to know why they were walking around on Earth in the first place. Pretty sharp guy. I can't say that about myself at 20 years old. It was all a great mystery to people. This struck me as very odd, since even in my youth, I thought knowing why we are here should be a starting point, not an end point. A few people did seem to have a strong opinion on this issue, but the fact that no two opinions were ever the same left me wondering why nobody could agree on something that should ultimately be the same for everyone. We are all human beings, experience the same physical reality after all, so there should be a conclusion we can all reach that stands above opinion. According to scientific method, subjective experiences involving the mind or imagination is not provable or repeatable, and thus cannot be trusted as a means of establishing truth. Objective observation, in contrast, can be provable, that is repeatable, since we exist in a physical world based on a rule that never changes. Objectively then offers a anchor for some semblance of truth in a world of seeming untrustworthy subjective interpretations. Of course, it is sensible to trust in that which we know to be true from physical observation, but it does not stop the consideration of anything the imagination can create as a plausible extension of our sense of reality. This is, after all, how new theories are developed in science. We think before we know. Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge, emphasizing the importance of free thinking. But he also recognized the need to ultimately reckon the product of the imagination with objective reality. Otherwise, anything goes, it becomes meaningless if we can make things up as we go along. If there is more than one answer to reality, it would mean there is no truth. And yet there is a recognizable, manifest, objective truth around us all the time, as science discovers daily. Hence, truth must be something set in stone, because if it changed at all, it wouldn't be the truth. Discovering the singular nature of this truth recognizes it as one basic thing. It is therefore the goal of objective science. Unfortunately, according to the scientific method, we can only be totally sure when we are wrong about something. We can never be completely sure if if a theory is objectively right, since there are so many variables in physical reality that science can only do its best to approximate that reality using models and mechanical metaphors. Science is a mere representation of reality, and over time it refines more and more until hopefully one day it gets there. That is the idea anyway. However, it takes years for science to establish basic theories in the first place. So if we are waiting for ultimate answers from science, we need to live a very long life, you see, indeed, to get them, far longer than a single lifetime. Moreover, science retreats from making such claims at all, so we cannot expect the ultimate answer to come from science anyway. In contrast, there are those who claim to have found out this ultimate truth without the scientific establishment, becoming what is commonly known as enlightened, like Buddha, for instance, and those who claim to have opened their inner eye of wisdom to know and see the absolute truth for themselves. Since having the inner eye open is said to do that for a person. How many of them were or are scientists? I do not know the answer to that question, but I am sure it is very few, if any at all. Unfortunately, the simple fact that science does not take enlightenment seriously, coupled with the advice to never trust anyone that claims to have the answer, will leave any person hoping to gain the ultimate understanding in a state of disrepair. In a state of despair. Deep down, everybody senses there is a goal to achieve in life, but the only way to achieve it is to understand the elusive truth. How can we do that when science itself cannot find it? A great and very useful adage is seek and you shall find. This suggests that there is an answer to every question if your question is pertinent. We can waste a lot of time chasing answers that do not exist simply because we have asked the wrong question. Then one day out of the blue, all your information comes together in a singular understanding. The truth itself finds us. There is a very specific nature to this event that is certainly not different for each person, no matter the insistence of those who wishfully think they have opened their inner eye because of the promise of what it holds for them. The proof is in the eating of the pudding, as they say, and the typical subjective and conflicting nature of many personal descriptions concerning spiritual events is proof enough that there is misunderstanding in the modern world. Such is the general nature of the unscientific New Age. Only a true open eye person can verify their eye is open due to what comes into their mind and out of their mouth. A quote from Matthew 7:16, "You will know them by their fruit." Yes, you will. If there is a singular truth at the root of all things, it suggests automatically that the event of gaining with spiritual wisdom is where the subjectivity of awareness and the objectivity of the manifest would then fuse together in unison as one thing only. Hence, there is a definite singular experience to be had by everyone that never changes from one person to the next, since the truth never changes. Naturally, the inner eye event is a profound life-changing event and was revered throughout the ancient world as the single greatest prize of physical existence. Why is it not occurring today? Interesting, isn't it? Well, back then, this is my take. Back then, as we taught, me and Phil had taught to do with mystery schools. At one time, there were mystery schools on this planet. That has changed. There are no mystery schools, and if they are, very few people who are leading these groups are really telling the whole truth. Only someone who has been through it can recognize when it is reached in the ancient past, though, since it is almost completely unknown in today's world, and it's such unrecognizable if we do not know it in the first place. The fact that we can understand the ancient world and all its symbolic glory after this event is proof enough of the validity as not merely a subjective experience consigned to the randomness of the imagination, but a objective reality we are all supposed to achieve in our adult life. The thing is, we cannot achieve spiritual illumination entirely by ourselves, since it is the truth we are seeking. That truth must come to us and allow us to experience it directly. Then and only then can we understand it. God, being our true, infinite, supreme self, is the truth itself. And we need to invite God to us by being honest and compassionate and truthful, while earnestly seeking understanding. The truth simply is. Therefore, we must go to it in earnest and knock on its door in ourselves. Another quote. For everyone that asks it, receive it, and he that seeketh, find it, and to him that knocketh, it shall be opened, based upon Matthew chapter 7, verses 8. The great work, chapter 1. The great work is self-work, aspiring to be one with your true and highest infinite self. We effectively sacrifice our own selves to the truth when we recognize that truth is eternal, while we are merely transitive. When we make bread from dough, allow it to prove and put it in the oven to bake for a certain amount of time, we have the faith that it will be properly cooked and turn out right. This is the nature of the great work. It takes the faith that going through certain experiences and processes will lead to the result of the effort you have put your faith in. When we do this, the result is liberation from the physical world, or resurrection, known as salvation in the Christian religion. The great work then is self-work and the endeavor of finding the singular truth by experiencing life and learning about it through the words and experiences of others until we get there ourselves. We will know when this happens. Singular nature is infinite, encompassing everything from the smallest point to the unending expanse. So we are going to know when we encounter it. First, we meet the infinite, then it affects us, having given us a understanding, which, when we understand it logically, liberates us to a cosmic reality. The inner eye, or third eye, is associated with the pineal gland that sits in the central region of the inter-reptilian human brain. When this single eye opens, light is said to shine into the brain in distinct beams from within the gland, like a pine cone that opens to reveal its individual teeth, or a flower whose bud inverts to open its petals, exposing its inner treasure to the outside world. Since the pineal gland is in the reptilian part of the brain at the top of the central nervous system, it may be referred to as the head of a snake. The depreciation of the great serpent refers to its role as the pinnacle of the cosmos, linking anyone who has it to the permanent cosmic awareness. Hence, In its open state, a person becomes a serpent of wisdom, since this light heralds the acquisition of true understanding according to ancient scripture, making anyone who attains it effectively a member of the so-called wise serpent race. Even though there is misunderstanding concerning evil talking serpents in the Abrahamic tradition, there is obviously nothing inherently evil about the event of gaining wisdom in the ancient past. It is an event associated with unification of the dual brain or split psyche as the end of ignorance, known throughout the ancient world as divine union. In this sense, it is the human being in their original state of ignorance that is considered evil. So it's not about something you've done wrong, sin-wise. It's your ignorance, not knowing what is true and false. As a result of its grand unifying status, the inner light has earned a multitude of names and symbolic references throughout history, such as the elixir of immortality, the Holy Grail, the font of all wisdom, the treasure of heaven, the waters of life, the fountain of youth, the philosophical stone, the face of God, the Lamb of God, the Son of God, the mountain of God, the Ark of the Covenant, Yahweh, the oracle, the all-seeing eye, the eye of Horus, the eye of Ra, the crown of thorns, the beard of truth, the bark of Ra, the star of Bethlehem, Noah, Thoth, the talking snake, the red lion, the golden fleece, the Gordian knot, fire of the gods, Lucifer, the bright and morning star, Genie, Emerge, Zeus, Poseidon, Satan, severity of the truth, Marduk, Abzul, Kingo, Brahman, etc. The list goes on and on. The light is refers to as a talking snake, but it does not actually talk as such. There are no voices in the head, only insight, dependent on conscious focus. The brain normally performs two contrasting operations. One is the ability to see things in detail to gain definition. So it's like basically what I call as an illustration or example is like a magnifying glass. The other is the ability to step back and see the whole picture of a situation. Like pulling back your focus, sacrificing detail in the process. Pulling back all the way from detail goes to a singular expansion condition, just as focusing in goes to a singularity. The moment of unification with God, known as the alchemical tradition as the chemical wedding, sees you pull back to the top of the greatest mountain there is, God's mountain, known as the ancient world as Axis Mundi, or Meru. The M in Meru means water and refers to the original waters from which all cosmic manifest life comes. In Hinduism, this is the Shakti, that is the energy in the womb of Prakriti, or the womb of space, that personifies life and movement, or the physical world from subtle energy to refined material. In the watery chaos appears a primal mound rising from the waters as a reference to the finding of truth, and a definition for the undefined expansionism as the only solid ground we can stand on. The primeval mound is the perfected, divine, singular tip or singularity of God's mountain. Going to the top of the mountain allows us to see all and everything at once by understanding the singular nature of truth itself. Our bird's eye view of things is taken to its limit. We effectively become clairvoyant, which is simply the French expression meaning clear, sighted, such that our thoughts are based on understanding the truth, becoming lucid, with great depth as a new basic standard. When this total view is newly acquired, it means all details lies obscured in the greatest distance, meaning we spent time from then on gaining those details, filling out our knowledge that is now self-corrected. The benefit of having been to the top of the mountain is that our detailed inquiries are going to be guided essentially by the fact that we know the all of existence, which has taught us the truth in its succinctly, isn't it? Armed with this total truth, we can make sure the details we establish from then on are valid and useful. We can guarantee truthful understanding through being able to fit the details we now discover into the total view we have gained, giving us great depth of realization. It is no longer like researching and gluing pieces together, hoping for the best. Defining the singularity truth has given us focus and solid ground to stand on, as if the primordial mound has sprung up from the undefined waters of chaos for us. Insight comes to us in sudden bursts of realization, determined by our own conscious focus. Other times, though rare, we are literally shown things in our mind's eye as if we are in God's classroom, making the brain effectively like a receptacle of truthful information or a cup of truth once it is unified. The cup metaphor of the brain is the same as the cup of Grail legend, otherwise known as the Holy Grail, whose associate story directly represents every person's right to attain this light, while explaining in allegory terms, through the story of King Arthur among many others like the Wizard of Oz, how this can be achieved correctly. The Grail cup may be interpreted as the pineal gland itself that receives the waters of light, as much as with the brain, since it is now unified with the light. Famously, the young King Arthur takes Excalibur, the sword of truth, from the stone in which it is embedded. At the start of his journey, ironically, taking the sword of truth also represents the end of the journey to spiritual wisdom, emphasizing a loop of some kind where the beginning and the end are joined together. This is a loop of existence we all complete, from Alpha to Omega, by doing the great work. The name Excalibur has a history of variation in northwestern Europe, but is thought to come from an old Welsh called Cadaquich, where Cal, C-A-L-E-D, means hard, and bewitched means cleft or or breach. In Latin, it is Caliburnius, from Chalybs, meaning steel, which of course is hard. Whatever the true origins of the name, the most important thing is that if it represents the indifference of the cold, hard truth. By its very nature and definition, truth must be rooted in a single idea that is set in stone. You can learn nothing of value without it. If truth was based on more than one idea, there would be duality or conflict, and either only one is true or both are wrong. As such, the truth is guaranteed to be one thing only: fixed, severe, and indifferent, like a double-edged sword that will cut its user just as easily as it would cut through an opponent, metaphorically. The only way a person can wield the sword of truth safely, then without being cut by it themselves, is by gaining understanding that leads to deep spiritual wisdom from critical thinking or self-honesty, above the level of the individual ego or self-interest psyche. By pulling the sword from the stone, Arthur symbolically attaining the light of truth by understanding the singular truth itself, which is an act rooted in its own self-honesty. He can then judge things correctly as a compassionate king or master reality, since understanding truth and becoming one with God naturally brings peace and stillness within the individual, destroying any competitive ego they had, allowing their compassion to shine through. This is the price of gaining the ability to wield the sword of truth. It marks the loss of the competitive, animal-based, instinctively ego that seeks to dominate and control others, to make it feel safer in a seemingly unsafe world. Vulnerability is restored, whereas the fruit of the ego is narcissism and the pretentiousness of apparent invulnerability. The fruit of the true greater self or God is peace, balance, and justice. This event happened to me when I was 44 years old, 5 days after meeting the divine eternal spirit, after more than 20 years of looking for understanding. I had no idea at the time that this event was known as the infamous chemical wedding in the West, because there is so little information concerning the direct truth of it. in the modern world and its multitude of associates in myth. I had no source to draw from directly to my knowledge. There were no wise teachers in my midst to explain things to me apart from the light itself. But that took its time before showing me anything directly, which was due to having a busy life. It was not until 10 months after my own event, when I had time to sit and to be still for an extended period, that my gray cup or brain was suddenly filled with significant information concerning the great work of the cosmos. It occurred when I was thinking about the similarities between the design of the Great Pyramid in Egypt and Angkor Wat. That's spelled Angkor Wat, W-A-T, in Cambodia. And that both have four main points around the fifth, raised higher in the center, called Mount Meru, M-E-R-U. Knowing the correlation between the two monuments, I remember that the Great Pyramid is uniquely at the center of the world's land masses. Being at the center of the world, the pyramid can be thought of as an allegory for the pineal gland at the center of the brain, if the brain is compared with the globe of the world. Just as the pineal opening event heralds the birth of great wisdom and knowledge in the individual, so these are qualities that have always been associated with the Great Pyramid in Egypt that I now sought to understand once and for all. As I looked in my mind's eye at the issue of the pyramid being at the center of the world's land masses, an involuntary vision took over my inner view. It was the world as a globe rolling up towards me, as if I were in the upper limit of its atmosphere, looking across to the horizon in the distance. The globe was bland and gray in color and seemed to roll gently towards me, revealing a single pyramid on its surface that came into view on the horizon. And this is all was taking place within his own head, okay? As I watched this inner vision, it came into my mind seemingly from nowhere that the pyramid is the symbolic pineal gland of the earth. Within 1 second, as the thought of the pineal correlation occurred, what appeared to be a complete answer written in English in black ink on a large piece of what looked like old papyrus was presented to my mind's eye from the right side of my inner view. It's the right side of my inner view, as if someone sitting next to me had simply passed it in front of my face. The surface was completely covered in writing of different sized letters. Some of it has handwriting at a 45-degree angle, with a single prominent sentence in the largest letters right through the middle stating, "With these bricks, I make my pyramid." So I'm going to explain something here. He's got a little artwork here showing what is happening and what's about. So the clay itself is information. In life, we gather clay. And the next category is called bricks, which is a comparison. Clays make bricks. The next point is pyramid, proportion. Bricks make pyramids. The next section is called capstone, that is measure. Pyramids are capped in divine union to gain true measure. And the last one here, it says diamond, meaning understanding. A capped pyramid is a diamond. Pyramids are diamonds in a field of clay. In bold words here, he says, "With these bricks, I make my pyramid." This is about you, all of us. We're supposed to be constructing a pyramid in our lives. Unfortunately, we're not aware of what's going on in our lives at all. Most of us follow our parents, and then my grandparents, and the great-great-grandparents, such and such, never actually even asking, why am I here? What is my purpose? And who am I? What am I? Continue on. As I zoomed in on the information, which was crystal clear, the words seemed to transform into images leaping off the page into my conscious mind as if they were alive. This occurred in the space of a second, and I understood the overall meaning of the papyrus without having to think about it. One sentence revealed the universe is a field of clay scattered with diamonds, and another stated pyramids are diamonds in a field of clay. Within about 3 seconds of first seeing this particular papyrus, I understand everything that was written. It was a metaphor concerning the concept of clay as a raw material that represents the information we use to eventually establish true reality to ourselves. And with this clay, we can make bricks that represent pieces of the understanding gained from studying useful information. And with these bricks, we can only make a pyramid, since all truthful information tends towards a point of unification, where full measure and definite understanding is gained. From the singularity at the top of the pyramid, we can perceive the infinite all at once, as if we were standing on top of the highest mountain there is, as its capstone. Our pyramid is then capped from above, representing the opening of the highest door by divine grace to become a diamond of perfection. So he shows this in a diagram here, showing the 5 points, the clay on one side, the bricks in another corner. This is all the square, and the capstone, and then the part we call pyramid. And then at the very top, he's got here diamond. And then he illustrates this based upon what it becomes as simply is information at the corner of the square, and then a comparison of that information, and then to measure that information, and then the proportion of that information to the point at the top is understanding. In other words, clay is being used to make diamonds, which shine in the clay of their own making, like space and stars that coexist simultaneously as the alpha and omega of a never-ending process throughout the cosmos, as proposed by the great polymath Walter Russell. You know who Walter Russell is, don't you? He wrote a book called The Secret of the Light. Brilliant man. And many gifts. He married a woman who had similar gifts in a lot of ways. He was a sculptor also. This principle may be applied at every level of creation, from the waters of chaos to their culmination at the pineal light. In its overall progression, stars are the diamonds of the galaxy, and planets are the diamonds of stars. Creatures are the diamond of a planet whose brains are the diamond of the creature. The diamond in the brain is the pineal light. Then, and its number is 6, representing directly by the 6-pointed star of David. So he continues here. He gives what at the very top here, illustration again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, this is all based upon 5. Okay. Again, he's looking at 4. We're looking at the pyramid, the 4 parts of it being square, at the very top being the capstone. So the first level is clay, bricks, pyramid, capstone, and diamond. In the next one, which I've explained, also information, comparison, proportion, measure, and then understanding. Then the next one is primo material, blackening, whitening, redding, R-E-D-D-E-I-E-N-I-N-G, and philosophical stone. And the last one he says simply is the galaxy, number 1, 2, the solar system, 3, the planet, 4, the creature, and 5 being the brain. Since reality is simple but has the greatest depth, the method of instruction concerning the deepest nature of reality is supposed to be fulfilled by myth and religion, involving 3 layers: mythical, ritual, and mystical. At the mythical level, a religion contains stories that convey wisdom and transfer that modalities of wisdom to those who are considered profane by the use of coded stories. These stories are constructed to convey the greatest wisdom through the allegory of the hero and not to be taken too literally. The gospel stories of Jesus fit into this mythical level, and yet they are telling us direct truth concerning our highest selves. At the level, ritual practices are constructed to convey meditations on aspects of divine nature. The building used for such ritual practices are also designed to contain universal principles through the proportionate allegory of sacred geometry. The mystical layer is the final level, where the divine is experienced directly by the individual from the training afforded by the myth and practice of their personal study. Thus, every religion is supposed to bring each person into direct contact and union with God. The truth of our own existence, such that a go-between is no longer needed, and the guru or master teacher gives way to the truth itself in the student's appreciation. This final level is the reason for the previous two, allowing the individual to slowly come into sync with the divine itself by listening, reflecting, and meditating on each new understanding, slowly building a pyramid or a mountain in their mind, gaining the knowledge that leads to self-mastery. The writer of mysticism and cosmic awareness called Iona Miller explained the stages of unification. Her name again is Iona Miller, Miller. There's 7 basic steps here. Number 1 is the quest. Number 2 is the awakening of love. Number 3 is the attainment of knowledge. Number 4 is detachment. Number 5 is unification or blending. Number 6 is annihilation. And number 7 is divine consummation. 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 According to psychologist Carl Jung, every person we dream about at night represents an aspect of our own selves. If we extend this concept to the planet or the galaxy or the universe as a whole, we might see that we are all aspects of one being as a whole, simple manifest as individual separate beings at the physical level. Becoming aware of this great truth in the process of assimilating deep information changes and transforms our behavior from acts of selfishness to acts of selflessness. As Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, the ignorant work for their own profit. The wise work for the welfare of the world without thought for themselves. The nature of becoming selfless is the unqualifiable part of the great work that comes as a natural consequence of doing the work on ourselves through our own form of therapy and scientific learning. Building our own inner pyramid of understanding is seemingly purely mechanical as a process, in contrast and therefore quantifiable. It is only when we act out of care, repeat, care, very critical, folks, care, for the greater being, as a result of our gained understanding, that we prove our worth in loving compassion for others, a deep and sure understanding that we invite the divine self to us to achieve union. This change in attitude is the sure sign that our learning is having an effect, attracting our own highest self to us in the process. A capstone cannot be placed on a non-existent pyramid. Okay. You see, if there's no pyramid, there won't be any place to put the capstone, period. And we will never know when this event is coming until it arrives. We might ask, can we not prove our worth in selfless acts anyway and ignore all the learning beforehand? The only problem with such an attitude is that when we are invited into divine union, we may not have the intellectual capacity to unify the dual opposites and define oneness to ourselves to gain the salvation that is liberation from suffering in the world of illusions. This may seem harsh or unnecessary unnecessary if God is supposed to be so most merciful and kind. Is not salvation about the act of selfless service alone? If we think for a moment, we will discover and remember that God is our true self, and as such, it is up to us in the end to produce our own salvation as a result. God invites us to understand when we have divine union, but no one can save us other than ourselves. It is up to us to unify dual opposites with God's Spirit inside of us from the event of union. Indeed, it is because God's Spirit resides in us after union that we expand from our body and find the link between heaven and earth, the end of knowledge, as Krishna calls it in the Bhagavad Gita, freeing us from the world of suffering. Effectively, doing the great work is a question of awareness, analyzing oneself, and having access to the truth concerning the natural world in the first place, to forearm us. In the absence of teachers, we are left with our own experience of the natural world to draw information from. This is how I had to do it, since in Europe there is a shortage of those that know this subject from their own liberation. That is called soul science. It's a title that is laughed at in the scientific and intellectual driven Western culture in general, you see. Even though ideally a teacher should be sought by the individual, how will they know who is good and who is not? This brings us to the issue of knowing for ourselves by ourselves, that is. Bruce Lee once said, the only help is self-help, emphasizing the point of becoming sure from thinking and experience. A teacher will only ever be a guide, so there must be an internal dialogue where the individual can question issues relative to their current understanding. As time goes on, greater insight is gained, that is through comparisons, until we reach the top of our pyramid mountain, where there is no comparison left to make, because all is one. If the truth is sought to control others or fulfill dark desires, the absolute truth will not reveal itself. Why should it? Since the truth is divinity and comes to the individual from divine grace. You see, it is God's grace, you see. We invite it to ourselves by having the right attitude. God knows more about us than we know about ourselves. If it is bestowed on us when we prove ourselves not only worthy of handling the truth, as it most succinctly level by gaining correct knowledge, but by developing a selfless attitude towards our existence, such that we act without personal gain in mind. God is the greatest gift we can acquire in this sense. When dealing with ancient religious buildings like a pyramid, the allegory of sacred geometry is the language used to convey the truth of manifest existence. A notable example is the square circle. As everybody knows when they study ancient Egypt, the base of a pyramid is a perfect square created on the ground by a method known as stretching the cord. This was a ceremony used by the pyramid builders in association with the northern stars as a fixed reference to make sure the square base of the pyramid conforms to the cardinal directions as a logical foundation. Symbolically, this means we tune into our true reality above the level of personal opinion. Square in the circle is of major importance in the body of work known as sacred geometry and relates to the supposed infinite nature of consciousness, represented by the circle as an infinite-sided polygon, with the finite nature of the manifest physical world represented by a square whose perimeter matches the circumference of the original cycle to perfectly reflect its qualities. A three-dimensional version of this relationship would be the sphere to its inherited cube, where both have the same surface areas. The cube then would represent physical manifest reality just as a square can. A circle or sphere being scalable to any size and representing singular nature has no standard distance to compare. As a result, it may be said to be the same in every direction, like a crystal blue sky that seems to go on forever in an undefined expansion state with no center. The only meaningful position in a circle would be its center. But how do we know where the center is? If the circle is the infinite and as such unmeasurable, undefined singularity issue in the first place. Of course, it is easy to say that defining a circle on paper gives us a center when we use a compass to create it. The circle on a paper is a mere representation and not the infinite issue itself. To find the center, we need to turn the circle into a square and render it measurable in order to define a center. By so doing, the central singularity is found from which awareness can perceive itself as the infinite circle it reality is, and gain total understanding of his own greater self. Hence, without this process, it would not be possible for the apparent infinite nature of consciousness to achieve the state of gnosis. This means we are discovering our own true nature by building a pyramid, and as such, the pyramid form represents the meaning of life. If the information we have been comparing to make our bricks is correct and truthful, the bricks will fit together in their rightful place, and our building will go up true from its square base. Building to a singular point at the top is then the equivalent of pulling the four corners of a square into a center, such that they combine in unison, and as all become one and as rise in glory. This is all symbolized by the Djed pillar, DJED, an ancient Egyptian tradition that shows four corners together as a single pillar. Raising a die is a symbolic representative then of completing our pyramid, and by extension, divine union and illumination itself. For example, the capstone of a pyramid is then a singular entity and representative of this final realization. It is a one single piece of stone carved from a meteorite that comes from the sky above, called a bin stone in ancient Egypt, and has connections to a mythical bird that lands on the primeval mound of creation, very much like the story of Noah's Ark, where a dove is sent out to find the first land emerging from the great flood. Coming from above is a way of alluding to the fact that it is our true self, God, who completes our pyramid when our attitudes have aligned with divinity, and our knowledge will allow us to complete the understanding of unity. The Great Pyramid of Giza represents this original mound of creation. In the myth of Heliopolis, known as Mount Meru, among its many names, the very same as the mountain of God, is the center of the galactic disk in Hindu myth. The Great Pyramid sits at the center of the world's land masses, effectively making it the pineal gland of the earth, as the pineal itself sits in the center of the brain and connects you to the true center of all things, defined by divine union when we discover our true selves sitting at the seat of the soul. As Rene Descartes put it, all the while during life, we are supposed to find our way to this seat and release ourselves into cosmic consciousness that has been waiting for us all along. This makes perfect sense in terms of the Great Pyramid being the container of truth, knowledge, and wisdom, since the light of the pineal center is said to be the source of wisdom within, known as thought, or DJEHUTI, in ancient Egypt. If we are wise, by understanding the truth itself, such that our inner eye opens, we were considered a thought, a god, or a magi in the ancient world. That naturally speaks profoundly about the truth. However, being simply honest does not make us thought. That's spelled THOTH, if you understand. It is only when we have understood the truth itself as the result of our honest thinking that makes it so. Every god holds a representation of the symbolic tool they use to build their inner pyramid, known as a was staff, WAS staff, which has the head Anubis, ANUBIS, known in a bird form, and the base of a serpent's forked tongue. The head of Anubis has the form of a bird in the sense of pecking or devouring stone to make the bricks that make our pyramid, as it is a chisel. The base forked tongue corresponds to the two base chambers of the heart, because we are connecting our heart with our head in this process, the two major centers in the body, so that love and truth become one in unified perfection. We also see this with the picture of Jesus when he refers to his heart, and also with his one hand above. The same concept of construction and conscious reconnection also exists in the tree of life from the Kabbalist tradition, which is made of 10 points, or seraphim, as they are all called in Hebrew. These are said to be the secret behind manifestation that allows for self-realization and can be thought of as a series of points that logically fit together. For example, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. And then you would see an example here of the book, with the first being 1 point, meaning the seed, and then the line with 2, and then the inverted tree, and then the triangle, or I should say not triangle, but the pyramid with 4 points. The singular point at the top represents the primary singular nature of the truth itself, the monad, God in heaven. Below this point is a horizontal line, make as if the original point has been opened out in two opposing directions, causing a duality and manifestation. The fact that they have retained their individuality as one and as two is evident in the way they are drawn, that is, separately, below. The now formed composite trinity is the triangle of 3 points, denoting the original three are together in a unified relationship. Finally, a 4th point is made, extending away from the original trinity, forming a tetrahedron. I'm wrong about that. I said pyramid. I shouldn't have said that. Wrong. Tetrahedron shape seen from above. A point, line, surface, and volume have been made physically for manifesting the original creative principle in the individual, turning them into a God. It's a lower G-O-D. The last point in reconnecting at a distance to the original point, allowing self-perception to take place using the distant gain just at the top of the pyramid, as it is the distance from the point of the base that forms a pole between them. This pole is a dire, D-J-E-D, or backbone of the pyramid. Once self-recognition is achieved, the final return to source moment is traditionally represented by a lightning flash from the base of the tree to the original monad at the top, and conjures the image of a zigzagging serpent. Once the physical has become manifest and developed to the human level, from monad, the inner work begins that leads back up the tree towards the original monad by ultimately unifying duality, shown by the 2 points just below the top. It works both ways. One is external development going down the tree. The other is the internal development that leads back up the tree, affecting the individual. This is but one example of the deconstruction of the tree of life. Another breakdown of its internal structure makes 3 triangles above the lowest point, represent the highest density of the physical body in opposition to the nature of mind. At the top of which is perfected soul is unison with truth. Either way, the tree of life shows us the journey of consciousness from unmanifested, undefined, singular nature back to its own singularity and self-realization. In mathematical terms, the growth of a plant also follows the expansion based upon a pattern of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that every plant germinates from a point-like seed into a linear stem on which leaves grow as surfaces. Finally, a bud forms at the top of the idealized stem as a volume that can eventually reproduce new seed to complete the cycle. To accomplish this, the bud needs to differentiate itself internally, like self-analysis when applied to the human psyche, until it flowers opens, giving off pollen if the flower is male. That leaves the confines of its original house to unify and germinate a new cycle. If the plant is female, a new seed is created many times over. the same as the seed that started the plant in the first place. The cycle is complete, where the end is the same as the beginning. Applied to a human being, the plant stem can be likened to the nervous system, with the brain as the bud at the top of the stem. Once this outer construction is established, the attention can turn inward, where the bud develops internally like a brain as it processes information. As we grow in life, we begin by living in accordance with the lower three chakras of our subtle body. As we think, we gain understanding that reaches down to the heart, from the head to meet the aspiration rising from the chakras below. Once our understanding has taken root in our heart, by transforming our attitudes towards the more divine, selfless nature, we produce activity that proves it and encourages our true self to reconnect with us. Like attracts like, L-I-K-E, to like. Divine union is falling in love with our true self in the heart, which raises the understanding of the experience in the heart back up towards the mind with the wisdom and experience of the infinite, completing with elimination. The heart understands the ineffable before the head gets it. As a result of being given the answer with divine union, this is the tree of life cycle again. Through an act of differentiality, or discernment in contemplation, the mind can eventually understand the nature of its own true self and effectively present its realization to the outside world like an open flower, albeit hermetically sealed within the head. The white crown of the Upper Egypt, for example, known as the Hedjet, Hedjet, commemorates this event as a seed starting to sprout a new tree from the head of the person wearing the crown. The bulbous, bulbus, pointed tip is based on the thymus gland associated with rebirth. The pineal activation is denoted by the serpent at the forehead. The soul is then a point source of awareness that expands exponentially on its release, when singular nature is understood as the pointed definition of a singularity referenced as the eye of a needle in ancient tradition. Sitting at the center of the brain as a newly self-realized individual is now the original seed of creation. The pineal light, known as the creator at this point, the brain is effectively germinated by the waters of light, L-I-F-E, or the light from the now open pineal gland region, which associates with divine water from chrism oil in the nervous system. In both Hindu and ancient Egyptian traditions, the lotus flower was used to depict the cosmic and human plant of consciousness, pointing us to the central location of the Great Pyramid at the base of the Nile Delta, as the allegory's central pineal location in the brain, symbolically positioned at the source of conscious expansion into the open sea beyond it. The Nile Delta looks like the flower of the lotus plant, the stem of which is the Nile River below to the south, whose head is the expansion from a point designated by the pyramid. It shows this also in the book, showing a human being, a skeleton, and also showing the Nile River as the comes out in the Mediterranean Sea as a lotus flower. Since the pineal light is the product of this transformation in the individual, it amounts in general to the root of all measure. In other words, when we have the light, we can use the knowledge of the singular truth to compare with all things we encounter in life from then on. Normally, we compare things in the outside world to each other to build our pyramid in the first place. The act of comparison is the basis of all counting and gains measure. Once we get to the top and the truth is gained, the truth itself becomes that which we use to compare with all things encountered that we may judge correctly. In my own experience, during the work towards elimination started in earnest in my early 20s, when I realized I was surrounded by people who didn't care about the meaning of their lives. The seemingly impossible task of piecing together the truth itself is extremely daunting to a young mind. The only reason I decided to do it then was because I realized there was nothing more important than the truth. Since I recognized from an early age that the truth is all there is, I was of the mind that I would find the truth by my own effort or die trying. In fact, I may have started the great work in my teens, since when I encountered Bruce Lee while doing martial arts myself, I was amazed at the wisdom coming from someone who was considered to be a maker, supposedly of violent films, and as such, not a man of peace, wisdom, and understanding. The more I studied Bruce Lee's, the more I found great wisdom in Taoism. This was my own introduction to wisdom. The more I explored the wisdom of Taoism, the more I seemed to recognize it, which filled me with a sense of purpose and gave me determination that I could establish absolute truth to myself in time. However, before the reader thinks this is merely an intellectual endeavor, the words of the Katha Upanishad, spelled Upanishad, I may have pronounced that wrong, help to remind us of the real nature of searching for truth and meaning. In part 2, chapter 2 of this particular book, there is a path of joy and there is a path of pleasure. Both attract the soul. Who follows the first comes to good. Who follows pleasure reaches not the end. The two paths lie in front of a man. Pondering on them, the wise chooses the path of joy. The fool takes the path of pleasure. Abiding in the midst of ignorance, thinking themselves wise and learned, fools go aimlessly hither and thither. The blind led by the blind. What lies beyond life shines not to those who are childish or careless or deluded by wealth. This is the only world. There is no other, they say, and thus go from death to death. Not many hear of him, and of those not many reach him. Wonderful is he who can teach about him, and wise is he who can be taught. Wonderful is he who knows him when taught. He cannot be taught by one who has not reached him, and he cannot be reached by much thinking. The way to him is through a teacher who has seen him. He is higher than the highest thoughts, in truth above all thoughts. This sacred knowledge is not attained by reasoning, but it can be given by a true teacher. The text mentioned one who has seen him as a translation issue. There is a tendency for zealous scholars to overemphasize each word of sacred texts, as if standardized interpretation is the way to understand them. We can realize this text simply means one who has become one with him, because no one can ever see God. Seeing God is a reference to finding the light in the underworld, since it is also known as the face of God. We can know God, but not see God, our true self, since our true self is all there is. As a result of the personal endeavor, we become one with the great singular spirit itself, beyond physical nature. God is the truth, and the truth is ineffable because it is singular. You see, this truth is in the unification of all things, and as a result, we can understand oneness in our consciousness, our conscious, rational mind, only when we encounter it ourselves. It takes a few days to understand this singular nature, even after the experience, as I found out, but it is an act of thinking, then, that unifies dual opposites into a singular whole after the nullification of thought in the contact with the divine itself. The ability to play with thoughts and concepts in the mind's eye turns out to be very useful, because the understanding of how all things are one is what opens the narrow gate of salvation. The Upanishads also talked about this event as reaching the point of a needle. By finding the point of a needle, then the individual becomes infinite and external, beyond the finite nature of the physical reality they were born into. Since singular nature is an infinite, unbounded, and eternal condition. In my early 20s, I decided to study mathematics and psychology, because these two subjects represent the study of physical reality as it is. After realizing I could study psychology in an armchair, it became apparent that I would have to study mathematics and physics from the establishment first. This drove me to college and university. I sought to understand the universe essentially. There was also the hope of going beyond current physics as a postgraduate student, and that I saw myself as a potential professional physicist. However, fate stepped in during my university studies and gave me another piece of reality to explore in the form of Kabbalah and a new insight research group headed by a man called Stan Tenen, S-T-A-N, Tenen, T-E-N-E-N, in New York. Tenen had deciphered the graphic nature of Hebrew in its seemingly original form, revealing it to be a method for achieving a understanding of reality for deeper than modern physics could go. The limitation of physics is that it only studies that which is physical. The Kabbalah seems to go way beyond that limitation, as if it had the greatest insight beyond the physical realm. The level of sophistication involved with Kabbalah struck me as a sign of true insight. As a result, I veered away from traditional physics into the world of the constructive imagination. That is, to think of conceptual terms to gain understanding above the level of that which is physical truth. I wanted to go beyond and touch the ineffable myself to gain true deep understanding and potentially help the world around me to see greater depths. To fix the world, however, we must first fix ourselves. This was my selfless wish to help the world out of its mental sickness, and disease. I spent the next few years going over this type of material, adding to my body of knowledge and fitting each new issue into the grand framework of reality I was accumulating. As time went on, I realized that I should never glue myself to any particular view, because something would often come along later that destroyed or altered that view of reality. I found I could not find much in the way of solid ground to stand, or unless I was rigorous in my own appreciation of these apparent truths. This is truly scientific approach, since rigor is the hallmark of scientific attitude. I compared many different concepts presented by many different people, always looking for deeper understanding. I knowing there is only one truth in the end. I would not adhere to any single religion, for instance, since they all seem to contain the same ideas fundamentally. By the time I reached 43, I was exploring the idea of astrotheology in the modern zeitgeist of researching secret societies and the esoteric literature that lays under the level of everyday existence for most. It was during this period that I heard about a man called Walter Russell and proceeded to examine his legacy. It turned out that Walter had had a series of divine inspired moments of great insights into the working of the material in the universe and had written them all down as a record. He then challenged this physics community of the 1920s, which was engaged in the idea of quantum mechanics, but was laughed at and ignored because he approached the community without mathematical proofs. Mathematics is a language of physics, and if you ignore it, you are ignored. You are also ignored by these institutions if you're not part of them in the first place. Even though Walter was rejected by the physicists of his time, I felt the need to study his works and determine for myself if he has anything to say. Boy, was I surprised. I have never encountered such an insightful rendition of actual reality written in the same conceptual terms as Kabbalah. That included God and metaphysics while explaining clearly how the universe works in modern, concise terms that I could easily grasp and relate to standard physics. I read one of Walter's books called A New Concept of the Universe and had to scan the pages a few times to get all the information that it contained. Walter helped me cast away old ideas that were slightly wrong here and there so I could glue them together. Using all that I had explored before, a better understanding of why we exist and how everything works. It brought me right back to the original ideas I had read in Kabbalah, that God is all there is, and the only reason for physical reality is so the ineffable, infinite nature of being can gain gnosis of its true self and definition and come to rest at a new blissful state of true freedom. This turned out to be the nature of an angel. The infinite and point came together by two extreme ends of the same condition, like infinite space and singularity. By studying the outer and inner worlds we find ourselves engaged in, we align our minds to that of God and end up at one with our true self. It was at the age of 44 at Angkor Wat that my own journey of the great work came to its first conclusion. And that is it. Chapter 1. The particular book called The Ascension Handbook by Phil Langdon. Thank you for being here. I know this was a longer video than I anticipated. But anyway, I wanted to share this. I feel like this is a valuable information, and that those who stumble upon this would be great to go and read this book online. So again, thank you. Again, my name is Brant Hunt, B-R-A-N-T, Hunt, H-U-N-T, and my channel is Discerning What is True. And if you like to see more, I share other things, but this is far more important than anything I've ever read in my life, to be honest with you. Okay. I am going to stop at this point because I'm pretty tired. My voice is about gone. Hello, Mary. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed it, and hopefully tomorrow I'll have the time to read the next chapter. So thank you for being here, Mary. Oh, I didn't know that. Wow. So you love Phil. You found him 6 years ago. Okay. All right. Well, I just recently found him. Probably no more than a month, Mary. I have been, this will be my second week. I'm supposed to talk to him on Friday, live with him and asking questions more and more about what he's talking about. So, and he's got a lot of wisdom and discernment, and seems like he's done the real thing. Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Much love to you. Appreciate you being here, and appreciate you commenting. And hopefully this will help. And if you know of others who have interest in this, I'd appreciate you sharing this with others. Okay? All right. Good night, Mary. You take care. All right, guys. We'll say good night at this point. Again, this is the Ascension book, chapter 1, A Great Work. Have a good evening and take care. Oh, yes. I think he does. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he has had the event. I'm not doubting that for sure. Okay, thank you, Mary. Hopefully see you another time. Maybe you can share some more wisdom with me. Okay, take care. Okay, bye-bye.